Before we start, I want to talk about the importance of that softball team. I'd really like you to sign up. You're probably thinking church softball, it's probably you're going to have a good time. Nothing brings a church together like beating other local churches of softball, so I'd like to win. I'm just kidding, we're there to have fun. But we do, if you do want to sign up, there is a sign-up sheet in the Connection Center out back. Somebody asked me afterward, they were like, where do you sign up? And I was like, I think online. Gave them the wrong information. There's a sign-up sheet out back. So now that we're off of softball and the importance of softball, let's move on to Ecclesiastes 2. That's where we're going to be this morning as we continue in Ecclesiastes, looking at the life of King Solomon as he toils through life trying to find meaning. So I'm going to pray, and then we'll get right into chapter 2. So Father, we thank you for bringing us this morning. Thank you that we get to come together, and thank you for the things in life that you do give us to enjoy, such as softball, to spend time as a fellowship and just get to know each other better, to live in communion with one another, just getting to know other Christians and sharing a bond of your love, Father. So we thank you that you do provide us with those things, and we thank you for your love and for your mercy and for how much you care about each one of us, that you want a relationship with us. So I just pray this morning that this would be glorifying to you and that you would give us wisdom and that you would just give us a desire to want to walk closer to you, to give up the things of this world and just be focused on your love and your grace. And we love you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so as we get started this morning, I want to start with the author of Ecclesiastes. It's important to know who we're listening to, who wrote Ecclesiastes, so that as we're reading this, we can understand the life of the author a little bit better. We know the author of Ecclesiastes is a man named King Solomon. We know this from the first verse of Ecclesiastes, and a little bit of a description in chapter 1. So here's a picture of King Solomon taken with a Polaroid. I'm just kidding. Somebody obviously drew that. But the depiction of King Solomon here is probably pretty accurate to what he would have looked like. He was this really rich guy who had a lot of wisdom, and he probably spent a lot of time alone writing, just trying to figure out, okay, what is the meaning of all of this? Just spending time alone. He described himself as a teacher king in Jerusalem. He's also the son of King David. It's the same King Solomon who asked God in prayer for wisdom. In 1 Kings chapter 3, he asked God, Lord, please provide me wisdom. In return, God gives him not only wisdom, but wealth and health and peace and everything that comes along with life. He gave him everything. This is the same King Solomon who built the first temple for God in Jerusalem in 1 Kings 6. He's building this temple for God. He not only wrote Ecclesiastes, but he also wrote most of the book of Proverbs and also the Song of Solomon, so we can attribute multiple books to King Solomon writing about his life. Now, the story of the book of Ecclesiastes is that wise King Solomon took a journey through life, investigating much about life and found it pointless and meaningless and mundane, searching for everything under the sun that the earth has to offer, trying to find meaning in it. We saw last week in chapter 1 that he was searching after wisdom. Okay, if I have enough earthly wisdom, then I can finally be happy. It'll finally give me meaning. But the book doesn't end there. That's not the whole story. He continues on after searching and striking out, trying to find wisdom. He writes at the end of the book that God is the only person that gives life meaning and purpose. That's where we get to at the end of the book of Ecclesiastes. But before we get there, we have to go through these middle chapters, which are a lot of them are showing his desperate search for meaning in everything under the sun. They're actually kind of depressing, a lot of these chapters, because it's him going through life, just trying thing after thing and finding that it doesn't lead anywhere. But at the end, he slides in with hope. Okay, none of this mattered, but I have something that matters. I found a relationship with Jesus. So it's important that as we read these chapters about the depression of life under the sun, we find that he finally comes to this conclusion that life only makes sense under God. So chapter 1, we saw Solomon look for that meaning in wisdom, and then we move on to chapter 2 this week. He's diving into a search of meaning inside of pleasure and amusement. searching like, man, okay, what can I find that would please me enough on earth, that amuse me enough on earth, that it actually has longing meaning, long-term meaning, not just like, oh, I'll be happy today, tomorrow, or next week, like something that actually lasts. He describes this journey as a bit of a science experiment, trying thing after thing, applying his heart and delighting in different senses, trying to find something that will mean more than just a temporary fix. So he starts off with pleasure. That's the first area. He's like, okay, if I pleasure myself enough, can I sustain this long-term happiness, this long-term meaning? Now, many times we think of pleasure, and we might think about it in a bad sense. Like as a Christian, like, oh, pleasure is bad. But pleasure in itself isn't bad. There are many bad types of pleasure. There can be a lot of things that lead you down a path that is going to lead to destruction. But there are times in the Bible where godly pleasure is encouraged. We see that in Psalm 16, verse 11. It says, "You will show me the way of life, granting me the joy of your presence and the pleasures of living with you forever." Just being pleased, living with God. And then 1 Timothy says this about pleasure. It says, "Teach those who are rich in this world not to be proud and not to trust in their money, which is so unreliable. The trust should be in the Lord, who richly gives us all we need for our enjoyment." So God gives us everything for our enjoyment, to enjoy things in a godly way. That's the difference between bad pleasure and good pleasure. Is it provided by God, and is it lifting up God? Is it building your relationship with him as you enjoy these things? It's not, okay, I'm a Christian and God gave me everything, so now I'm going to indulge in these pleasures that are not godly and it's still going to be fine. No, like you become a Christian, you have this relationship with God and your pleasures change. Oh, I'm chasing after the things that also pleases the Lord. We're meant to have happiness and joy in life, but is that what life is all about? Is that why we're Christians? Because, now life is all about happiness and joy. That's what Solomon is toiling with. Is life about happiness and joy all the time? And again, before we jump in, Solomon's not looking for something that's going to provide short-term happiness. It's not like, well, I found pleasure in that, and I'm good enough, like that's good enough. He's like, no, I want something that will please me now, but will also please me forever. Something that actually gives my life meaning, because a lot of these things that he goes after, a lot of these pleasures that he chases, do provide short-term enjoyment, short-term pleasure. But he's like, that's not what I'm searching for. So we're going to jump into to Ecclesiastes chapter 2, verse 1. I had somebody read the whole chapter last night, and I actually felt really bad by the time we were done, because I was like, I'm sorry, that was a lot longer than I thought. So we're just going to go a couple of verses at a time so that nobody has to do that. So verse 1, it says, "I said to myself, come on, let's try pleasure. Let's look for the good things in life. But I found that this too was meaningless." So first, he sets his heart on laughter and silliness and harmless amusement, chasing after, man, what would be funny? He wondered what lasting pleasure silly foolishness would bring to his life. His basic question in the second verse in chapter 2 is the same throughout chapter 2. He says, what does it accomplish? So as he's looking at laughter, as he's looking at this pleasure, he's trying to figure out, what does it accomplish? What does laughter, what does silliness in my life, what does it ultimately accomplish? Laughter and silliness are good, and most of the time they're harmless, but what lasting good does it do? Most of us, while we're teaching, if you've been here, you know that there's a lot of jokes told from this stage among various teachers. Everybody tells jokes once in a while, except Josh. I don't know that I've ever heard Josh tell a joke. He says he doesn't feel comfortable telling jokes. Josh is so solid, he doesn't need to tell jokes. But many of us tell jokes to try to keep people awake. I do. I'm just kidding. But like, jokes in themselves aren't, they're not harmful. There's no harm in telling jokes as long as they're not interrupting what's truly important. As long as it's not like you're getting to the message of Jesus and the importance of having a relationship with him and then throwing a joke in the middle of it. Like, there's a time for jokes where they're harmless, and there's times where jokes become harmful. So now that I said the harm of jokes, I'm going to tell you a joke. I thought this was funny. Jesus had just arrived in heaven after his ascension, and the first person he saw was a white-haired man who looked vaguely familiar. Jesus asked him who he was and what he was doing at heaven's gate. The old man said, "I am an old carpenter who is waiting for my son. He is not my son biologically, in fact. He came to be my son in the most unusual way. But I loved him dearly as any father could love a son, and I cannot fully enjoy heaven until he arrives. Jesus looks closer and shouts, Father? The old man looks back at him and says, Pinocchio? If you didn't get the joke, ask the person next to you to explain it. I thought it was funny, like, there's jokes that people tell you and they're funny and you laugh, but at the end of it, like, any joke or any amusement, like, the pleasure is short-lived. Like, sometimes you hear somebody laugh at a joke for way too long, you're like, okay, the joke's over. Like, it was funny for a second, and now it's over. But, like, nobody ever laughs at a joke for days. Like, man, I'm just still laughing about that joke that guy told on Tuesday. It's still so funny. Like, no, the pleasure of joking is short-lived. Humor at times can be a Band-Aid, though. Like, we have times where we use humor to go over the things in our life that are really hurting. I don't know about you guys, but, like, I see somebody, like, in pain. It's a really bad habit, especially being the youth pastor here at the church. Like, somebody gets hurt, and I'm like, tell a joke. Maybe it'll make them feel better. It doesn't usually work. Like, kids still like, I'm in pain. I remember one time we were playing dodgeball. I hit this kid in the face with the dodgeball, and I tried to tell a joke rather than being like, oh, I'm so sorry. I should have said I'm sorry. Because a lot of times joking doesn't actually cover what's going on. Proverbs 14:13 talks about this specifically. It says, laughter can conceal a heavy heart, but when the laughter ends, the grief remains. Man, laughter is just a Band-Aid. It's funny for a moment. You can make people laugh to cover what they're going through, but at the end of it, the grief is still there. The grief doesn't actually get healed by the laughter. Solomon concludes in a brief one verse that in terms of lasting pleasure, laughter is harmless and foolish and good. And he's like, man, it's fun to laugh and have a good time, but it's temporary and not lasting. It's not what he's searching for. Many of us use laughter as an escape from life, right? We say things like, man, I need a night out. I need to go out with friends and just laugh. And temporarily that works. It does help. Like, oh, it was good to go out and laugh with friends. But then you wake up the next day and you're like, okay, I'm still going back to work, and those things that I was struggling with before I went to dinner are still there. And you're like, I need another night out to laugh. It's temporary. You would need it to continue to happen, but ultimately it's just a Band-Aid. And Solomon's not looking for a Band-Aid. Solomon's looking for something that will actually give him peace in his soul. So moving on to verse 2. We're having clicker problems this morning. All right. He says, so I said, laughter is silly. What good does it do to seek pleasure? After much thought, I decided to cheer myself up with wine, and while still seeking wisdom, I clutched at foolishness. In this way, I tried to experience the only happiness most people find during their brief life in this world. So he starts with this pleasure of laughter and silliness, and then he moves on to like, man, I need to find it somewhere else, and he goes to wine, to alcohol. So he sets his heart on wine, and here wine isn't really a metaphor for anything. The word actually means wine, like he's drinking wine. But it could also be interpreted as meaning the finer things in life. Like he had all of this money as a ruler, like just all of this stuff. And he's like, man, the finer things in life. Maybe he put like a Rolex on his wrist and he's drinking wine. He's like, maybe the finer things will finally bring me that lasting pleasure that I'm going after. Will it fulfill me? So one of the words he uses is folly, which we can interpret as parties. So Solomon's talking about drinking parties. He's asking the question, investigating if drinking at parties with friends or surrounded by people, will that give him lasting pleasure and fulfillment? Some of us have had that question before. Man, will parties with drinking, will that fulfill me? And we go to college. Do we have any college partiers in here? Don't raise your hands. I'm just joking. But like, there's a lot of people that have gone through that. They go to college and they're like, man, I'm going to become a partier, because every high school kid sees college parties as everybody having a drink in their hand, doing cheers and being like, this is the best time of my life. And then they get there and they try it and they're like, what is all of this about? This doesn't lead to anything. But Solomon's going after it. He's like, man, maybe it's wine, the finer things in life. Drinking will get me to that point. Many people have turned to alcohol to mask their feelings or to try to find meaning in their life. And maybe you weren't a college partier, but here's some other ways that people use alcohol to cover those feelings. Does drinking a six-pack of beer after work help me or hurt me or make me happy? Do I need a drink of wine at dinner for it to taste good? Do I rely on wine to make food better? Do I need to smoke a cigar on the back porch in order to relax and be happy? Am I turning to these things to fulfill my life? The question at the moment is not, are these things right or wrong? That's not what Solomon was trying to figure out. He wasn't trying to go, well, is it right or wrong that I'm drinking? He didn't care. He was just trying to find lasting fulfillment in something. So whether it be alcohol or something else, he's like, it's not about right or wrong. It's just, does it do the job? So what does someone get when they give themselves over to drinking for the long term on a regular basis to try and find pleasure? If you said, okay, what happens to somebody if they drink their whole life trying to find pleasure through it? The CDC says this about excessive alcohol use. It says it can lead to the development of chronic diseases and other serious health problems, high blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, liver disease, and digestive problems, cancer of the mouth, throat, breast, esophagus, voice box, liver, colon, and rectum, weakening of the immune system, increasing the chances of getting sick, learning and memory problems, including dementia and poor school performance, mental health problems, including depression and anxiety, social problems, including family problems, job-related problems, and unemployment, and finally, alcoholism. Long-term alcohol use. For most people, you'd think the threat of like a lot of those cancers would be enough for you to go, yeah, I'm good. I'll find it somewhere else. But like many things in life, short-term pleasures are very tempting. So whether you've been tempted by alcohol use or some other short-term pleasure, many people struggle with these different things, even though there's warnings. Because they're like, man, I want to escape for a moment. I need a Band-Aid. Wine and alcohol, and honestly, these days, a lot of drugs are used to try to find short-term or long-term happiness. People use them for long-term happiness. I don't know about you guys, but if you drive around, you see more and more dispensaries popping up because it became legal. Like, hey, if people just smoke, then they'll be happier. And like they're popping up all over the place because people think, oh, if I just stay in that state, then I'll finally be happy for a long period. But in truthfulness, all of these things, alcohol, drugs, wine, like they all lead to nothing but short-term happiness, followed usually by throwing up. Many people still drink though, right? Much like laughter to mask reality just for a little while, just turning to those things. Man, I just need a Band-Aid, something. My life is so hard right now. If I could hit the bottle one time, I'd be good for now until tomorrow. And then that cycle just continues. But much like we shouldn't, Solomon wasn't searching for that short-term pleasure. Solomon wasn't concerned about, okay, what's going to make me feel better tonight just to get to tomorrow. He's like, I want something that will actually fulfill my soul. Moving on to verse 4. Good. It says, I also tried to find meaning by building huge homes for myself and by planting beautiful vineyards. I made gardens and parks, filling them with all kinds of fruit trees. I built reservoirs to collect the water to irrigate my many flourishing groves. I bought slaves, both men and women, and others were born into my household. I also owned large herds and flocks, more than any of the other kings who had lived in Jerusalem before me. I collected great sums of silver and gold, the treasure of many kings and provinces. I hired wonderful singers, both men and women, and had many beautiful concubines. I had everything a man could desire. So now we see him, he starts out seeking pleasure and amusement and laughter, and then he moves on to wine, and here we see him, he moves on to the things that will be for himself, delighting in the senses for himself. In verses 4 through 6, the word I appears 4 times, and the word myself appears 3 times. He's just talking about himself. Man, what would please me? Not worried about anybody. We need to understand that it talks about these things that he builds, these parks and gardens and zoos and all of these things. You're like, well, people could enjoy those, but he wasn't building them for people. Solomon was building these big homes and gardens and parks and public works is what he was calling it, but they had his name on it, and it was all about him. Man, that's King Solomon's park. He wanted these people to see his name on everything. It was about him. He did his stuff for himself. All of his hobbies were about himself. He spent his wealth on himself. What did that get him, though? We see it in verse 11 later. It says, nothing permanent. Even though he chased all these things that should have been fulfilling to him because they were about him, he said it still left nothing permanent. Now, I have some words that are tied to self, and a lot of times we see the word self, and it's followed with a negative word, or it seems bad in its own sense because we talk about ourself. So here's the list of words that I have that include the word self. The first one is selfish. Nobody wants to be called selfish. Hey, you're selfish. It's a word that we would say is bad because it means you're all about yourself. You're doing things that would benefit you. Nobody wants to be called selfish, except maybe the people that are self-involved and self-centered. They might be like, hey, that's a compliment. I'm worried about me. Being self-involved and self-centered, they both mean only caring about yourself. Oh, I'm worried about what job I can get. I don't care if I take somebody else's job as long as it benefits me. I don't care if I found $20 on the ground and some guy just dropped it. I'm picking it up because it benefits me. I don't care if it was his $20. Like, you're self-involved. Everything revolves around you. A lot of us have social media and we're very self-centered. You have a whole page about yourself. Look what I'm doing. Want to see the selfie of me? Do I look good? Trying to get self-assurance. Self-deception means you lie to yourself, trying to put up this facade and just pretend that things aren't actually the way they are, lying to yourself. Man, I am happy. This does make me feel better. I'm doing this, and now I actually am happy in the long run. Like, we lie to ourselves all the time, deceiving ourselves. This one doesn't really fit on the list, but I like it anyway because it fits the self words that are bad. Self-checkout. Self-checkout's annoying. It's annoying. And it takes away people's jobs. So I don't know how in any way self-checkout's a good thing. I'll tell you, the thing I hate most about self-checkout is, I go to Stop and Shop and I use the self-checkout there because you always assume it's going to be faster. And then you get up there and you accidentally scan the lettuce. And it's like, oh, you have to weigh that. And then you have to wait for the lady to come from across the store to clear the screen for you so you can keep scanning. You're like, dude, why can't there be a button that I can clear it? If I have to scan it all myself, shouldn't I have total control? No, you don't. You scan the lettuce and you're like, I'll never do that again. And she gives you the code. The other day I was there and the lady memorized every code. She's like, oh, those are the fingerling potatoes. That's 3468. It's like, okay, I won't remember. I'm going to scan them next time. But self-checkout's annoying. It's something that, doesn't somebody get paid to do this? I didn't go through training. I didn't go to college for self-checkout. But the next one is self-conscious. A lot of us can relate to self-consciousness. Man, I don't like something about myself. I don't like the way I look. I don't like the way I sound. I don't like the way I feel. I'd love to change something about myself. Nobody's going to like me. We try to, when we're single and somebody, you want to date somebody, that's the first thing. You're self-conscious. Who would date me? What do I have to offer? I don't like these things about myself. And then self-harm or self-injury, it's a cry for help. You go, why do people do that? Why would people harm themselves? It's because they're crying for help. It's not a good thing. Man, people harm themselves because they just want help. It's painful. And then self-justification means when you're wrong, but you can't admit it. If you're married, you've done this one. I do, many times. I do this one a lot. I told you to put the dishes away. I know, but, it's always followed by a but. And there's this reason why I didn't do it, when in reality, I just forgot. I know my wife's watching online. She's like, yup, you do that a lot. Yeah, self-justification. We can't admit we're wrong. It's it would just be easier to go, yeah, honey, I'm sorry, and just do it. But we like to have self-justification for why we feel the way we feel or why we do the things we do. So almost everything tied to self is negative for a reason. Why are all these things in negative sense? Because we cannot permanently make ourselves happy or fulfill ourselves in the long term, even if we put our name in big letters on things. Solomon's putting his name on zoos and parks, trying to make himself feel better. I own it all. But at the end of the day, if it's all about us, we're never going to make ourselves fully happy. Moving on to verse 7 and 8. Verse 7 and 8 continues Solomon's thoughts about living and serving himself. Solomon says he fourthly set his heart on using his wealth to see if having money and spending money and having more stuff would bring him happiness. It makes total logical sense that with being wealthy and spending money on yourself, it would bring lasting happiness, because you'd be like, well, I bought this thing and and I liked it for a while, and it made me happy, and then I didn't need it anymore, but I'm wealthy enough, I can go buy something else, and that will make me happy. And you could continue this path of just being happy where it actually lasts. Makes sense, but it's not true. I don't know about you guys, but this is the first Christmas where my wife asked, like, what do you want for Christmas? And I really didn't have an answer because I was like, it's just stuff. Like, what am I going to get that's actually going to make me happy for more than a couple hours, and then I'm going to be on to the next thing? Because you get to that point in your life where eventually you're just like, it's all stuff. This thing's too close. So at some point, the stuff just starts to become stuff. And you're like, I don't need more stuff. What actually make me happy is to have a clean house, to have less stuff. When you first go to buy a house, that's like the most exciting part. It's not like, oh, a new place to live. No, it's because you walk through the front door and there's no stuff. It's like empty, and you're like, look at all the space we have. We can like do gymnastics and stuff. And then you get in the house and you fill it with all your stuff. You're like, oh man, like all your stuff is there. Like, it's great to get rid of stuff. Like, eventually you're just like, man, this is too much. Like, I just want to get rid of everything. Now, we know that Solomon had a lot of stuff. We know he's filthy rich because of 1 Kings chapter 3, specifically verse 13. It says this. It says, and I will also give you what you did not ask for, riches and fame. No other king in all the world will be compared to you for the rest of your life. So the masses of King Solomon's wealth were talked about in 1 Kings chapter 4. It says Solomon also had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. That's ridiculous, 40,000 horses. You know how expensive it is to have one horse? There's some horse people in here that are like, my savings go to the horse. Like 40,000 horses. Like, this guy had so much wealth. He was ridiculously wealthy and had more stuff than any one person could possibly enjoy. King Solomon says the masses of silver and gold and horses and chariots and material things do bring pleasure. He's like, yeah, I do enjoy these things. I enjoy having stuff. But he's like, it's not lasting pleasure. It's not lasting happiness or fulfillment. He's like, I'm looking for full purpose to feel whole, and this stuff isn't doing it. Now, I know that some people in here are probably thinking, yeah, masses of gold and silver, I would be happy. Like, some of us are like, I could use a mass of silver right now. But truth is, like, money is important. I'm not trying to downplay, like, yeah, just go get rid of everything. You'll be fine. Like, no, money doesn't grow on trees, and life is harder when we don't have it. That is true. But it also doesn't bring lasting happiness or joy in our heart, at least according to Solomon. He's like, man, I had it all. I've had everything. I had all the riches. And in the end, what did it all mean? Now, some people like to argue with the Bible stating the age of it. They're like, man, that book is 2,000 years old. Those stories, that's not even relevant today. Solomon didn't have a mortgage that was 8.5%. Like, of course he didn't care about money. Well, there's a lot of people today that have learned the same lesson. Through history, people have learned this lesson. Man, they had everything, and they realized that, what did it all mean? So if you want to bring this forward a little bit, I have a picture of a house. Now, if you were at last night's service, please don't give it away. We'll get it to go. All right. Does anybody know whose house this is? It's not mine. My wife's home goods stuff would not fit in this house. Any guesses? Yeah, that is the house. It's Elon Musk's primary home. It's a box. It's 400 square feet. It's got a bed and a kitchen and a bathroom. That's where he lives 95% of the time. And you'd be like, why? Why does this guy, he's the richest guy in the world and he lives in this box? Well, in 2020, Elon Musk did have a lot of homes. He had mansions all across the country. He had all sorts of just mega mansions, people serving him. He was like the King Solomon of his time. But he sold all these mansions. He was like, I'm getting rid of it all and I'm going to move here. Why? Because in the end, Elon Musk learned all of this stuff's not bringing anything. I've got all these mansions, these people to entertain, all of this stuff. He's like, it's not bringing me anything. So he decided, I'm going to sell it all because stuff doesn't equal happiness. He wanted to make it simple. Simple is better. Elon Musk isn't a Christian, I don't think. I don't think he found the meaning of life, but he did understand that the stuff that he's chasing under the sun doesn't seem to be fulfilling what he's searching for. He's still searching for it in business and trying to use knowledge to get there. But maybe one day he will get there and realize that even the knowledge doesn't equal anything. So moving on to verse 8, Solomon says he lastly in verse 8 set his heart on being served in all ways by people around him. He was free of hard labor and even light labor and was being served by an army of male and female servants. These people just bringing him everything. I'm just like picturing him laying on like a hammock with like people hand feeding him grapes. That seems awesome. I don't know about you guys, but our honeymoon, we went to an all-inclusive resort. And honestly, it is the best when you can just order something and not worry about a bill. It's like it's already paid for. I'm just going to keep eating. But again, by the end of the trip, you're like, I want to go home and not eat for days. Like, eventually it becomes too much. And so he was being entertained by singers, and he was mentioning that his sexual desires were being filled by concubines. He had servants giving him short-term pleasure, but ultimately it left him empty. These people serving him hand and foot. And he's like, man, I'm still empty. He had singers singing to him, but that still wasn't fulfilling him. He even had a rotating catalog of women that he was trying to fulfill his life with, and he's like, even that is just short term. Man, it didn't give him any sense of meaning or identity. Just he's trying to use people. And the truth is, there isn't a person alive who can fulfill us or give us a solid identity, and many of us try to search that in a person. Oh, if I found the right wife, if I found the right partner, that person could fulfill what I'm searching for, give me meaning, which they can in a short term, like, well, I have more meaning now, I have a family to take care of, but ultimately it doesn't fill the longing of our hearts. True fulfillment doesn't come from another person, no matter how they look, no matter how much money they have, how they treat you, what they say to you. Like, it doesn't matter what that person does. They can't fill the God-sized hole in our heart ever. It doesn't matter who they are. So Solomon set his heart to investigate much about life and sought to delight his senses with everything he could find, or even every one. He's using all of these things to try to delight himself. But he says it all came to nothing, leading to emptiness of the soul, just feeling empty. So as I mentioned before, in verse 11, it talks about the fact that Solomon said it all led to meaninglessness. So verse 9 through 11, it says, so I became greater than all who have lived in Jerusalem before me, and my wisdom never failed me. Anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. But as I looked at everything I had worked so hard to accomplish, it was also meaningless, like chasing the wind. There was nothing really worthwhile anywhere. Man, his accomplishments rightly lifted him to prominence, this guy that everybody's serving. He worked hard for, and he had whatever means fame could bring him. But I think this is an important lesson right here, looking at how Solomon worked really hard for everything he had, and then it got to the point where he said, even that seems meaningless. And as Americans living in American society, a lot of us are stuck in that rat race, right? We go to work, and what we're doing is we're trying to work hard enough to finally accomplish something. And if I just work hard enough, I can finally accomplish that thing that I'm chasing after. Maybe it's just a comfortable retirement, and you're like, I want to retire and be comfortable and not have to stress. But what Solomon's saying is like, I had everything, and at the end of all my hard work, you look back and like, what did it mean? It doesn't mean don't work hard. Like, I'm not up here like, hey, go quit your job and just sit around. No, like, working hard is important, but the truth is, if your relationship with God is being affected because you're working hard to accomplish human feats, you're going to be left empty. The same way Solomon was. He put God aside and worked hard for all of these earthly things, and in the end, it left him with nothing. So as we're working hard, we have to remember that our relationship with God is more important than anything that we're trying to accomplish on an earthly level. Working hard, man, I'm just going to accomplish this. Man, it's better to accomplish a righteousness with God than it is to accomplish some means of earthly gain. So in all of this, Solomon didn't lose his wisdom or ability to genuinely assess meaning and fulfillment. He's looking at this with open eyes and an open heart, at least in an under-the-sun sense, just looking at life and saying, okay, this is how I'm going to do it, and he goes about it in a certain way. After delighting himself in all of these things, he is determined that it's all like chasing the wind, running in circles. What am I even chasing? If the clicker will work, We're going to move to 12. Yes. Nope. Okay. Oh, look at that. There we go. All right. Goes on to say, so I decided to compare wisdom with foolishness and madness. For who can do it better than I, the king? I thought wisdom is better than foolishness, just as light is better than darkness. For the wise can see where they are going, but fools walk in the dark. Yet I saw that the wise and the foolish share the same fate. Both will die. So I said to myself, since I will end up the same as the fool, what's the value of all my wisdom? This is also meaningless. For the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten. So I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling. Everything is meaningless like chasing the wind. Man, Solomon seems to have struck something here. He says, I saw there was more to gain in wisdom than in folly, and there was more to gain in light than darkness. Like, he understands that wisdom is better than foolishness. He's like, it's better to be wise than be a fool. It's better to have your eyes have eyes in your head than to walk in the dark. Like, anybody knows that. Like, if you're going to do a maze, like, be easier to have your eyes open, the light on, than just walk around in the dark feeling things. But apart from God's gift of understanding, he can't quite put his finger on why it's better to have wisdom than be a fool. He understands the concept, but he's like, I don't know why. We see that a lot in American society. Right? There are a lot of hardworking and dedicated people who are deeply committed to gaining knowledge and passing it on to others. And I just want to get smarter. It's important to be smart. And there's a sense of how important it is and how valuable it is to have an education and training and knowledge. And like, man, you got to go to college. You got to get a college education. But you know, if you ask people the reason why it's so important to get a college education, do you know what the most common answer is? Yeah, it's because people who, so here's the statistic. People who earn a college degree go on to earn, on average, over $1 million more in their lifetime than someone who doesn't. So it's obviously better to be a college graduate, right? Well, let's see what Solomon says in verse 15. He says, both will die. So I said to myself, since I will end up the same as the fool, what's the value of all my wisdom? This is also meaningless. It's like, what's the value of knowledge? If we're all going to die anyway, wisdom may be better than foolishness, but everybody still dies. 16 goes on to say, for the wise and the foolish both die. The wise will not be remembered any longer than the fool. In the days to come, both will be forgotten. So yes, like in a sense, your college degree might earn you $1 million more over the course of your lifetime than somebody who doesn't have a college degree, but the guy who digs your grave will still be getting $15 an hour. 17 goes on to say, so I came to hate life because everything done here under the sun is so troubling. Everything is so meaningless, like chasing the wind. It's just continuing. What is the point of it all? I'm just chasing around. It doesn't mean anything. In America, we see people spend tens of thousands of dollars on education. Some people are like, I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on education. Graduate school, like $50,000 a year. It's crazy. But why? Because they chase this degree in hopes that it will enrich their life. And it might or might not do that, but won't extend our lives another second. Getting a degree doesn't make your life any longer. We live in the midst of people who put such high value on education because they see it as the key to the American dream. Get a degree, get a great career, and then make lots of money. That's the American dream. Have a family, have a nice house, have a nice car. But Solomon warns that it doesn't matter how much education you have, it will all vanish the moment you pass away. He's like, what does that stuff matter? So you get a college degree and you have the American dream, you get more stuff, and then in the end, it all goes anyway. There's no enduring remembrance for the wise or the fool. Striving for education will let you down. It's the truth. The American dream cannot save you. Only Jesus can do that. So as we chase after the American dream, okay, I'm going to get a degree so I can chase the American dream, and then guess what? It still lets you down. Now, I know there's probably some parents like in here online, like covering their kids' ears, like, don't listen to him. Like, you need to go to college. Like, I went to college. I liked college. It was great. I'd do it again. But truth is, I'm not trying to discourage anyone from going to college, but we should be trying to increase our knowledge, but we shouldn't be putting our trust and value in that knowledge, in that education. Our trust and value will be disappointed if we're putting it in that instead of Jesus. Some people are putting all their trust in knowledge. There's been a lot of very smart people through history that put all of their value in, man, I'm going to learn everything. It leaves you empty in the end. And then I was thinking about the value that we put on education. Right? I was thinking about I have a 4-month-old daughter, and like I look at her a lot of times, and I'm already thinking about the guy she's going to bring home for the first time. And I'm like, all right, I've got like 17 years hopefully before that happens. But I'm like thinking about that moment. And for some of you, you've either gone through that or you have kids and you're waiting for that moment where your daughter brings a boy over for dinner for the first time. And what is the common question that dads, like they're grilling their future son-in-law and like, is he the one? And like that question that comes out is like, what are you going to do with your life? And it's like that question is meant as like, what career are you going to have? How much money are you going to make? Because my daughter needs to be taken care of. Are you going to provide for my daughter? What does that matter? That is the wrong question. Why is that the first question we're asking? The first question we should be asking is, what's your relationship with Jesus like? Do you have a relationship with Jesus? Because I don't care if the kid answers and says, well, I'm in the honors program on my way to become a NASA astronaut. Do you have a relationship with Jesus? No? Sorry. Like, it's the only thing that matters. Who cares what career they're going to have? If they have a relationship with the Lord, they're going to treat your daughter better than any guy that has any other job that doesn't know him. Man, living for pleasure will let you down. Striving for education will let you down. And sacrificing for a career will also let us down. That's where Solomon moves into 18, saying that, talking about his career, his hard work. He says, I came to hate all my hard work here on earth, for I must leave to others everything I have earned. And who can tell whether my successors will be wise or foolish? Yet they will control everything I have gained by my skill and hard work under the sun. How meaningless. So I gave up in despair, questioning the value of all my hard work in this world. Some people work wisely with knowledge and skill, then they must leave the fruit of their efforts to someone who hasn't worked for it. This too is meaningless, a great tragedy. So what do people get in this life for all their hard work and anxiety? Their days of labor are filled with pain and grief. Even at night their minds cannot rest. It is all meaningless. Man, so Solomon went on, after all his great accomplishments, he goes on to say they're all vanity. He goes on to hate it. Man, I worked so hard. What is it all for? The idea of leaving his wealth and material things to somebody else seemed to trouble him. Man, what if I'm just going to leave these to a fool? Well, his concern was well-founded because he had a son named Rehoboam, and he left his stuff to him, and that kid ended up being a fool in a lot of ways. It's like all this stuff he amassed, these things that he accumulated, he left them, and they were just wasted. He said, all his days are sorrowful and his work burdensome. Even in the night, his heart takes no rest. If death robs our work of meaning, then life is indeed sorrowful. Work is burdensome, and there is no rest or relief from the despair of a meaningless life, right? Like, man, if all that happens is we work and then we die, then what was the work worth? It's all vanity. If we believe that death is our final resting place, then what does any of it matter? King Solomon understood that better than anyone. He had everything he ever wanted here on earth, but he understood he couldn't take any of it with him. It's like, I've got all this stuff, all these treasures. He's like, if this is the end when I die, then what does any of it matter? It doesn't matter if I die the same as a fool. Like, we both have nothing in the end. Moving on to the end, 24 to 26. So I decided there is nothing better than to enjoy food and drink and to find satisfaction in work. Then I realized that these pleasures are from the hand of God. For who can eat or enjoy anything apart from him? God gives wisdom, knowledge, and joy to those who please him. But if a sinner becomes wealthy, God takes the wealth away and gives it to those who please him. This too is meaningless, like chasing the wind. Man, suddenly in these verses, Solomon, he gets the light switch. He sees it. And he gives us a glimpse of what he really feels. And it parallels what happens at the end of chapter 12. If we jumped ahead, chapter 12, he ends with, man, the only thing that matters is a relationship with the Lord. So again, remember that Ecclesiastes, it ends with Solomon finding that permanent hope, but he's still searching in this chapter. He describes his quest for fulfillment in laughter, wine, self, wealth, and people, just trying to find fulfillment. He dove headfirst into those things, and what's he find? He finds the bottom of an empty pool. He dives in, man, there's nothing here. It's all empty. In verse 24 and 25, he tells us that life without God is not enjoyable. Life is meaningless except for those who live for God. Without God, we invest our life in everything we think is important, but in the end, it either goes to someone else or comes to nothing. That's the truth. You can accumulate all this stuff, thinking all this stuff is important. My job was important, making money, my retirement, and then you die and it goes to somebody else. And it's like, well, how important was that? Because you can't use it anymore. With God, there's a dimension to life which is endlessly fulfilling with meaning and purpose. Having a relationship with God, Solomon's like, you can have nothing and be full. You have everything. The things from the hand of God, verse 24, are what fulfills us in life. At the end of Solomon's deliberations, we'll see through the next 10 chapters till we get to the end, he finally arrives to this conclusion in chapter 12. We'll get there. Hold on. There we go. He comes to the conclusion of that's the whole story. Here now is my final conclusion. Fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. It's the only thing that matters. He said, fear God and obey his commands. Live for him. All of these things that you think are pleasurable in life are only pleasurable if you have a relationship with the Lord. Life is absolutely meaningless, pointless, fleeting, a quick vapor unless we have a God-given perspective about life, just passing us by. Man, he had everything his heart desired, but in the end, he figured out that the whole duty of being a human is about having a right relationship with the Lord. This lesson is taught throughout the Bible. People that figured out, I've chased everything under the sun, but in the end, it was only about the things that God desires. Nehemiah talks about this in chapter 8. It says, Nehemiah continued, go and celebrate with a feast of rich foods and sweet drinks, and share gifts of food with people who have nothing prepared. This is a sacred day before our Lord. Don't be dejected and sad, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. He's like, parties are great. Go have a party. Go laugh with people. But it says the joy of the Lord is your strength. If you don't have the joy of the Lord, then those parties are going to mean nothing. Then 5:18 talks about wine, Ephesians 5. It says, don't be drunk with wine because that will ruin your life. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. Doesn't mince words. Man, wine will destroy your life. But if you're filled with the Holy Spirit, you have everything. And then Philippians 2:4 talks about indulging in yourself. It says, don't look out only for your own interest, but take an interest in others too. How do we stop worrying about ourselves? It's by going outside of ourselves and being worried about other people. And you want to learn how to stop being so self-conscious, to stop worrying about the things in your own life. Go help somebody else, and you'll stop noticing everything you have going on. When we're so self-centered, self-focused, we're going to notice every little thing that we have going on. It's like, just worry about other people. And then it talks about wealth in Matthew chapter 6. Matthew knew about wealth. Matthew 6:19, it says, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat them and rust destroys them and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will be. Man, stop chasing after the things of the world. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't be saving for retirement, but if we're chasing after that as an end-all, be-all, and that's the means, man, I want to get to this point where in my life I have enough where I feel accomplished. You're still going to feel empty. There's a modern-day man that lived the life of Solomon, because like I said, people like to look at this book and say, well, that was 2,000 years ago. Solomon doesn't understand. Well, here's a modern-day man that lived the life of Solomon. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. He rose from poverty to fame in the 50s. And has anybody in here seen the movie Elvis? So for the young people in the room, that's the only way we know him, by watching the movie. But it was really insightful because it showed the rise and downfall of Elvis and like what his life was like. So he built Graceland in Memphis, Tennessee, and his songs topped the charts, and he starred in Hollywood movies. Like, I've seen a lot of, like, I haven't seen the movies because I heard they're actually kind of bad. But like, does anybody in here like the movies? Are they? Yeah? All right. But like, Elvis Goes to Hollywood or Elvis Goes to Hawaii or whatever. Like, he had these movies, and then like he was known for having this extravagant lifestyle, riches and fame, paying cash for cars and private airplanes. But in the end, all of that money, all of that fame couldn't buy happiness. 20 years later, his life spirals out of control, and then in 1977, he died of a drug overdose. It's funny, last night I said 1973, and this guy in the back said it was 77. He said, I know because I was on my way to summer camp when he died. So he died on that guy's way to summer camp, 1977. But he left everything he had acquired in life to somebody else. Like he had all this fame, all this stuff. And now like those Elvis trinkets on Amazon, somebody else is profiting off of those. Like he's not getting any of that. So Elvis probably would agree with Solomon. What was all of it for? It didn't mean anything. I went through all of that. I had all the fame, all the wealth. And if it had bought him happiness, then why did he have a drug problem? But it led him to emptiness. Man, I got all this stuff, but I don't really have anything. King Solomon discovered the same truth, and then he tells us earthly riches cannot satisfy. Even the acquisition of all of life's pleasures can leave a person empty, longing for more. It says that King Solomon was known for having 700 wives and 300 concubines. How would you think that was going to make you happy? It's really hard to keep one wife happy. He had 700. I don't know like how that part of his plan was like, I think this is going to be fulfilling. But he like chasing after beautiful women. Man, if I marry the right one, she'll make me happy. He built vast palaces and vineyards. He acquired people and animals, stockpiling silver, gold, treasures. He had all this amusement, people singing to him. And all of these things were probably resulting in daily happiness. Like, oh, I like listening to that person sing. That provides pleasure. But at the end, he'd go to bed at night and be like, what is all of this for? It doesn't mean anything. He describes possessions, activities, and entertainment. He says this in 2:10, going back, talking about how he lived. He said, anything I wanted, I would take. I denied myself no pleasure. I even found great pleasure in hard work, a reward for all my labors. Man, throughout Scripture, we see this kind of trait through humankind, the sinful desire to have more. The thing about this truth is that most of us hear it, but a lot of us don't want to believe it. Like, yeah, that didn't work for him, but give me golden treasures. I'll be happy. I'd like to try. Like, we want to experience it for ourselves because we're like, man, that guy probably just didn't do it right. I know how to live like that and be happy. No, but truth is, like, Solomon did it. He lived it. He had everything. So truth is, like, if we decide we want to do it on our own, I'm going to experience it for myself. I'm going to have laughter. I'm going to have wine. I'm going to worry about myself, wealth. I'm going to have people around me. Eventually, it's all going to come to nothing without the Lord. That's where Solomon gets. That's where we end. And going back to chapter 12, verse 13, Solomon gets there. He says, fear God and obey his commands, for this is everyone's duty. It's like, man, after you're done chasing all that stuff, after you finally put the bottle down, you're like, I'm done with this. He's like, get to this point. Get to the point where you understand it's just about fearing God and obeying his commands. He's like, that's the only thing that will truly give you meaning and purpose. Without God, everything is vanity. Man, if we look at Solomon's life, and he had everything that his heart desired. He had all the money, all the wealth, all the people around him, all the parties, all the friends. Like, he had everything. And if he couldn't find meaning outside of God, then how are we supposed to? The only thing that truly matters is here, fear God and obey his commands, just living righteously with the Lord, having a right relationship with God. So as we leave this morning, like, if you don't have that right relationship with God, maybe you're like, I'm the guy toiling. I'm the guy running around trying to figure out what the meaning of life is. I go to bed at night, and I'm like, man, what does any of this mean? I go to work in the morning, I make money. I make money so I can buy stuff, so I can have a house over my head. Eventually, I'm going to die. What does it mean? Man, stop chasing it around. Stop running around for nothing. Start a relationship with God this morning. If the band wants to come back up, we're going to pray and close. But before we close, I think it's important to give people the opportunity. If you're in here this morning, you're like, I'm wasting my life. I've been here for 40 years, and I'm still trying to figure out what the meaning is. I want to know what it's like to actually be fulfilled. Then start a relationship with God this morning. Don't leave here and go, well, I'll figure it out. It's been long enough. You've been trying. You've tried to figure out what the meaning of life is. What is the importance? Start a relationship with God today. You're never going to regret it. So I'm going to pray, and I'm going to give you guys an opportunity. If you don't have that relationship with God, it's so easy. You just ask him into your heart, Lord, I'm a sinner. Forgive me. And I just want to start a relationship with you so that I can finally be filled. I'm sick of chasing the bottle. I want to put it down. I'm sick of chasing short-term pleasure to fulfill long-term needs. I'm just sticking Band-Aids on everything. So that's you. I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to give you an opportunity just to raise your hand and start walking with him this morning. I'm going to pray with you, and we'll give you a new believer's pack, and you can start your journey with the Lord this morning. And we'll do it with everybody's heads bowed. So, Father, we thank you this morning that we have the opportunity to walk with you, that when we have a right relationship with you, we get to truly enjoy the pleasures of the earth. These things that you gave us to enjoy, the things that make your heart happy, that we get to walk in those pleasures. Lord, I pray that we would just give up the things in our life that we keep trying to lean into to find pleasure, and they just keep leading us to emptiness. They're leading us to nothing. And they might make us feel good for a moment, but we may wake up the next day feeling terrible. And why did I do that? Why do I keep trying to go back to those things? Lord, I just pray that you would heal hearts in this room. If we feel like, man, I'm just too far off the path, I can't come back. Start a relationship with you this morning, Lord, because you clear the slate. You just want a relationship with us. So this morning, as we go to leave, Lord, if anybody in here has a heart that you're pulling on right now, Lord, I just pray that you would give boldness to start walking with you. And stop toiling. Stop walking around in meaninglessness. Just walk around searching. And if you don't know God, then the light is off. You're just that guy walking around in darkness trying to find his way. Just start walking with the Lord this morning, and we can have true meaning. So Lord, as everybody's head is bowed, if that's you this morning, you're like, man, I've been walking around and it's all meaningless. I don't know what the purpose of life is. If that's you this morning, if you would raise your hand, I'd love to pray with you after. Start your journey with the Lord this morning. Is anybody in this room? If there's not, I'll just assume we're all walking with the Lord. If you want to pray at the end, if you're like, man, I'm shy, I don't know what I'm doing, well, I'd love to pray with you. So I'll just say at the front, at the end, and if that's you and you're like, man, my life is a mess, maybe you know the Lord. Maybe you're like, I know the Lord, I know what he wants for my life, but truth is I've walked away and I don't know how to get back on track. Well, I'd love to pray with you this morning. We can just get your relationship with God right so you can leave here clean, leave here a new person, just walking right with the Lord. So God, we thank you that you give us the ability to keep coming back to you, even when we screw up, even when we walk away. You're right there with open arms waiting for us to come back, Lord. You are so great. You have so much mercy upon us. You have so much grace. You have so much love for each one of us. And I thank you that we know the truth, that we get to walk with you every day to enjoy the pleasure of the earth that you gave us. Just pray that you would point out what's righteous, what's good, what is right, so that we wouldn't be messed up and walking and getting caught up in the things that are under the sun, chasing after that stuff that ends to emptiness. Lord, I just pray that we would be chasing after your heart, walking with you and just loving you as we go through life, because life isn't perfect, but when we're walking with you, it's so enjoyable. And we can be so in love with you, just walking in the Spirit. So I just pray that we would all be doing that this morning. And I just pray that you would pull some heartstrings if people are in here right now and you want them to start walking with you this morning. Lord, I don't want anybody to leave this room not having that relationship with you, Father. So I just pray that you would pull on some hearts if somebody in here needs to have a relationship with you this morning, Lord. So we love you and we thank you and we worship you for your greatness. In Jesus' name, amen.
Searched the world, it couldn't fill me. A man's empty praise, treasures of fame, never enough. You came along and put me back together, and every desire escuchado todo.